ever driving through northern Montana and you come across a road marked Black Pine Service Route 14, don't stop. Don't take pictures. And if you see someone standing between the trees, don't let them know you've seen them. I wish someone had heard those words before October of 2023, because whatever I met out there wasn't an animal. It wasn't a person. After that night, I stopped believing forests are empty. Some places are occupied. They're just very good at hiding. The last place before the forest was a tiny gas station, only 2 fuel pumps. An old man stood behind the counter reading a newspaper. When I mentioned Black Pine Lookout, he slowly lowered the paper. His expression changed immediately. You're staying overnight? I nodded. He sighed. Don't. I smiled politely. I've camped in worse places. He looked at me for several long seconds. Then he quietly reached beneath the counter and handed me an old paper map. GPS doesn't work out there. I thanked him and turned toward the door. Before I stepped outside, he spoke one last time. If someone whistles after dark, don't answer. He wasn't joking, not even a little. The deeper I drove, the darker the forest became. Even though it was only late afternoon, very little sunlight reached the road. The trees seemed impossibly tall, growing so close together they almost formed a wall. The air felt strangely heavy, almost like driving underwater. Then, I noticed movement in my side mirror. Something pale flashed between the trees, too fast to identify. Probably a deer, at least. That's what I told myself. 5 minutes later, I saw it again. This time it was moving beside myself, keeping exactly the same speed, always hidden beyond the trees. Whenever I turned my head, there was nothing there, just endless rows of pine trees. Yet the feeling never left me. I wasn't driving through that forest alone. At the time, I worked as a freelance photographer. Most of my jobs involved abandoned places and remote landscapes. One afternoon, an outdoor magazine hired me to photograph forgotten fire lookout towers across Montana. One tower immediately caught my attention. Black Pine Lookout, built in the 1940s, abandoned sometime during the late 1980s. No hiking trails, no tourists, just an old service road disappearing into the forest. Exactly the kind of place I loved exploring. I packed my cameras, extra batteries, camping gear, and enough food for 3 days. My GPS warned me that I would lose signal about 40 miles before reaching the tower. I smiled. That sounded like part of the adventure. About an hour later, I reached a locked gate across the dirt road. A green Ranger truck was parked nearby. A woman in her 50s stepped out wearing an old Forest Service uniform. She checked my permit without saying a word. Finally, she looked up. You're heading to Black Pine? Yeah. She looked past me toward the trees. You'll be alone. I usually am. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she leaned a little closer. If anything walks beside your car, don't stop. I laughed quietly. She didn't. She unlocked the gate. As I started driving away, she called after me. One last time. No matter what you hear tonight, never look into the trees. I reached Black Pine Lookout just before sunset. The tower stood above the forest like the skeleton of something forgotten. Rust covered the metal supports. Several windows had been broken for years. Every wooden step groaned beneath my weight. Inside, everything had been left exactly where it was. An old metal stove, a dusty desk, coffee mugs, a broken radio, even a calendar still hanging on the wall. October 1987. No one had ever turned the page. Outside, the wind suddenly stopped. Completely. No birds. No insects. No leaves moving. Nothing. It was the quietest place I had ever experienced. Then somewhere below the tower, someone whistled. I froze. The old man's warning came back immediately. If someone whistles after dark, don't answer. The whistle came again, closer this time. Almost playful. Slowly, I walked toward one of the broken windows. Every instinct told me not to look, but curiosity won. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. Only darkness between the trees. I swept the beam across the forest. Then, I stopped. Someone was standing between 2 trees, far enough away that I couldn't see a face. Too tall, too still. I slowly lifted my camera. Zooming in, the figure never moved. It simply stood there, watching the tower, watching me. Then my camera screen flickered. For less than a second, the figure appeared much closer, standing directly beneath the tower. I lowered the camera. No one was there. The forest looked empty again, or it wanted me to believe it was. This scene should feel like uncovering a terrible secret. Speak quietly and thoughtfully. I barely slept that night. Every hour the whistle returned, always from a different direction, sometimes below the tower, sometimes somewhere deep in the forest, always patient. As if something was simply waiting. Just before sunrise the forest became silent again. I convinced myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe hunters, maybe echoes, maybe my imagination. While photographing the inside of the tower, I moved an old filing cabinet. Beneath it, a loose floorboard. Under the floor, a small rusted metal box. Inside there was only one thing, an old leather notebook. The cover read, Black Pine Lookout, Station Log. The first pages were ordinary. Weather reports, equipment inspections, fire observations. Then the handwriting changed. It became shaky, uneven, as if the writer's hands had been trembling. One page read, It learned the whistle. Another said, It stays beyond the trees during daylight. Then another, Do not acknowledge it. The final entry ended with only 6 words. If it reaches the stairs. The rest of the page had been torn away. Sunrise, I followed an old trail leading downhill. According to my map, there used to be a ranger campsite nearby. It took almost 40 minutes to find it. Nature had nearly erased the place. The picnic tables had collapsed. The fire pit was filled with moss. Pieces of an old tent were buried beneath fallen leaves. At first it looked abandoned. Then I noticed something that didn't belong. A backpack. Modern, not old. Inside there were bottles of water, extra batteries, a flashlight, and a digital camera. Out of curiosity, I pressed the power button. To my surprise, it turned on. There were hundreds of photographs. Trees, mountains, wildlife. Nothing unusual. Until the last picture. It showed the exact campsite where I was standing, but behind the photographer between the trees someone was watching. Tall, perfectly still. The timestamp said 3 weeks ago. The camera also contained a single video, 42 seconds long. I pressed play. At first it showed the campsite during daylight. The man filming sounded nervous. I think someone's following me. The camera slowly turned toward the trees. Nothing, only the forest. He laughed quietly. See, I'm just losing my... A whistle interrupted him. Exactly the same whistle I had heard the night before. The camera jerked upward. Branches, sky, heavy breathing, then a voice, very quiet, almost impossible to hear. It whispered, Don't look. The man spun around. The image blurred violently. Then the recording ended. No creature, no attack, nothing. I watched it again and again. Only then, I realized something. The whisper hadn't come from somewhere in the forest. It came from right beside the camera, as if someone had been standing only inches away. I hurried back toward the lookout. Halfway there, I stopped. Fresh footprints crossed the trail. Bare feet. That made no sense. The temperature was close to freezing. Who would walk barefoot through these woods? I crouched beside the trail. The footprints looked human, until I counted the toes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every footprint had 6 toes. I followed the trail for nearly 100 yards. Didn't lead away from the tower. It circled it, again and again, as if something had spent hours walking around the lookout, watching it, waiting. By late afternoon, dark clouds rolled across the mountains. The temperature dropped quickly. As I climbed back into the tower, I noticed something impossible. The trees weren't moving. Not a single branch, not a single needle. Yet above them, the clouds raced across the sky. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. The sun disappeared behind the mountains. Almost immediately the whistle returned. But this time, it wasn't alone. Another whistle answered, far away. Then another. Then another. Within minutes the entire forest seemed alive. Dozens of whistles. Maybe hundreds. Calling to one another. I locked the tower door. Even though I knew a wooden door wouldn't stop whatever was out there. Around midnight the whistles stopped. A different sound replaced them. Metal, a slow heavy clang. Someone was climbing the stairs. Clang, pause. Clang, pause. Each step echoed through the tower. Whatever it wasn't trying to be quiet. It wanted me to hear it. The footsteps stopped. Halfway up, silence. 5 seconds. 10, 30, then 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Not violent, not desperate, almost polite, as if someone was asking to come inside. I didn't move, neither did it. For what felt like forever we stayed there, separated by nothing more than a wooden trapdoor. Eventually the knocking stopped. I waited. 1 minute, then another. Finally, I forced myself to move. Slowly, I walked toward the window overlooking the staircase. No one. The stairs were empty. I swept my flashlight across the forest. Nothing. I let out a nervous laugh. Maybe it had been an animal. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Then behind me, the old radio crackled. I froze. The radio hadn't worked in decades. Its power cable had been cut. Static filled the room. Then a voice, distorted, almost mechanical. "So, you looked?" The radio fell silent. At the exact same moment, I noticed muddy footprints crossing the dusty wooden floor. They hadn't been there before. The prints began at the trapdoor and ended directly behind the chair where I had been sitting, not beside it. Behind it, as if something had climbed into the tower while I was watching the stairs outside, and it had been standing right behind me the entire time. I wasn't waiting for sunrise. Whatever had entered that tower wasn't an animal. Animals don't whisper through broken radios. They don't know whether you've been watching them. I threw everything into my backpack. Camera, flashlight, car keys. Nothing else mattered. The eastern sky had just begun to brighten. The forest looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but it felt wrong. As I climbed down the stairs, I noticed something. The muddy footprints continued onto the metal staircase, fresh, as if whatever made them had climbed down only moments before I opened the trapdoor. I reached the ground. I kept my eyes on the road. I remembered the ranger's warning. Never look into the trees. Then, I heard footsteps. Not behind me, beside me. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Every step I took, something inside the forest matched it perfectly. Always hidden, always keeping pace, never letting me see it. After nearly 20 minutes, I finally saw myself. Relief washed over me. I unlocked the door, jumped inside, turned the key. Nothing, no lights. No engine, no sound. The battery had been brand new. I climbed out, opened the hood. Everything looked normal. Then, I noticed something tied beneath the windshield wiper. A strip of faded red cloth, wrapped around an old piece of paper. The handwriting looked familiar. It matched the ranger's logbook. It read, "If you're reading this, it has already started walking with you. Do not drive. It wants you to leave the forest." That's how it gets closer. Before I could think, a whistle echoed through the trees. Then another, then another. This time they came from every direction. I looked around. The road hadn't changed. But suddenly, I realized something. The trees surrounding me formed a perfect circle. I could have sworn the road had been perfectly straight. The whistle stopped. Complete silence. Then, I heard voices. Soft, familiar. My mother's voice. My younger brother laughing. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years. One of them had died 5 years earlier. Yet I heard every word clearly. The voices drifted through the trees. Closer, closer. Then, I heard another voice. My own. "I found something. I think it's trying to." The sentence ended. I had never spoken those words. Against every warning, I turned toward the forest. Dozens of people stood between the trees. Men, women, children. None of them moved. Every face looked exactly like mine. Slowly they all smiled. Not naturally. Too wide. Too slowly. As if they had learned how to smile by watching people. Then all of them spoke together. "You finally looked." I stumbled backward. None of the figures chased me. None of them even blinked. They simply stood there smiling. Then the nearest one tilted its head. Its lips moved, but the voice came from somewhere behind me. "You finally looked." The figure took one step forward. Every other figure copied the movement, not one after another, all at exactly the same time, perfectly synchronized, like reflections inside a broken mirror. Then I remembered the old station log. It learned the whistle. I had misunderstood. There wasn't one creature. There never had been. The forest itself was learning voices, learning faces, learning people. Every person who looked into those trees left something behind. A memory, a voice, a face. Enough for the forest to make another copy, and now it had mine. I ran. I didn't care where. Branches tore at my jacket. Roots caught my boots. The whistles followed me, sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes inside my own head. Hours later, I burst out of the trees. A highway. A truck slowed to a stop. The driver rolled down his window. "Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. I simply pointed back toward the forest. He looked. "There isn't anything there." I turned around. The dirt road was gone, the service gate gone, the lookout tower gone. Only an endless wall of pine trees remained. The police searched for 2 days. They found nothing. No road, no tower, no campsite. According to every official map, Black Pine Lookout had never existed. I sold every camera I owned. I never returned to another forest. For months, I woke up hearing distant whistles. Eventually they stopped. Or maybe I simply got used to them. 3 years passed. Then one morning, I received an email. No subject, no message, only one photograph. It showed me sleeping in my own bedroom. The picture had been taken from the corner of the room. I live alone. I called the police. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints. Nothing. One officer asked if I had security cameras. I did. Together we watched the recording. At exactly 3:14 in the morning, every camera froze for 9 seconds. When the video returned, someone was standing beside my bed, perfectly still, watching me sleep. The cameras never recorded it leaving. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night because I feel someone standing in the corner of my room. I never look, because I finally understand what the ranger was trying to tell me. Some things don't hunt you because you enter their territory. They hunt you because you notice them. And once they know you can see them, they never stop watching.